Death is often seen as the final chapter in a person's story. But for some historical figures, their remains have taken on a life of their own, shuffled across continents, hidden from enemies, or even exhumed to solve centuries-old mysteries. Today, we dive into the fascinating and sometimes bizarre tales of historical exhumations. From Wild West outlaws to revolutionary heroes, these stories reveal how the dead continue to shape history long after they're gone. Let's start with Jesse James, the infamous Wild West outlaw. Known for his charm and intelligence, James often posed as a cattle buyer under the alias Tom Howard to evade capture. Officially, he was shot and killed in 1882 by fellow gang member Bob Ford, who betrayed him for a $5,000 reward offered by Missouri Governor Thomas Crittenden. Ford shot James in the back of the head while he was unarmed and cleaning a picture frame. But rumors swirled for decades that James had faked his death. In 1948, a 100-year-old man named J. Frank Dalton even claimed to be the real Jesse James. To settle the debate, the James family exhumed his remains in 1995. DNA tests confirmed the body was indeed Jesse James, though some still insist the outlaw escaped. After his death, James's body was displayed in a $500 casket, drawing crowds eager to see the notorious outlaw. The Ford brothers capitalized on the infamy, reenacting the shooting in a touring stage show, though many saw them as cowards, not heroes. Next we travel to Argentina, where Eva Perón, the beloved First Lady, became a political symbol even in death. Known as Evita, she championed workers' rights and women's suffrage, and her death at 33 from cervical cancer devastated the nation. Millions attended her funeral, and her body was embalmed by Dr. Pedro Ara, a Spanish pathologist, who preserved her so well that she appeared almost lifelike. Her embalmed body was displayed publicly until a military coup overthrew her husband, Juan Perón, in 1955. Fearing her corpse would inspire Peronist uprisings, the military hid her body in bizarre locations, a movie theater, a waterworks facility, before secretly burying her in Italy under the alias Maria Maggi. For 16 years, her remains were moved over a dozen times, becoming a macabre political pawn. Finally, in 1974, her body was returned to Argentina and laid to rest in a fortified crypt in La Recoleta Cemetery, where it remains today in a bulletproof glass coffin to prevent desecration. Even America's most revered president Abraham Lincoln wasn't spared posthumous drama. After his assassination in 1865 by John Wilkes Booth, Lincoln's body was transported by train on a 1,700-mile funeral procession, with millions of Americans paying their respects along the way. But in 1876, a gang of counterfeiters hatched a plot to steal Lincoln's body from his tomb in Springfield, Illinois. Led by a counterfeiter named Big Jim Kennelly, they hoped to ransom the body for $200,000 and the release of their best engraver, Ben Boyd. The Secret Service, then a fledgling agency, infiltrated the gang and thwarted the attempt. After the plot, Lincoln's remains were moved 17 times and hidden in secret locations within the tomb to prevent further theft. Today, his final resting place is a heavily fortified monument in Oak Ridge Cemetery, encased in a steel cage and buried under 10 feet of concrete. Talk about taking security to the extreme. John Wilkes Booth, the man who assassinated Lincoln, also had a controversial afterlife. After being cornered and killed by Union soldiers in 1865, Booth was buried at the Washington Arsenal. But rumors persisted that he had escaped, and some conspiracy theorists claimed the body wasn't Booth's at all. In 1869, his family moved his remains to a Baltimore cemetery. Decades later, in 1981, author Michael Eddowes claimed Booth had been replaced by a Soviet spy during his time in Russia. With the permission of Booth's widow, his body was exhumed, and dental records confirmed it was indeed Booth. Still, some skeptics argue the truth lies in DNA testing, using the remains of Booth's brother. The debate continues, keeping the mystery of Booth's final fate alive. Zachary Taylor, the 12th U.S. president, died suddenly in 1850 after a brief illness. Officially, his death was attributed to gastroenteritis, likely caused by overindulging in cherries and milk on a hot July day. But some historians suspected foul play, theorizing that Taylor had been poisoned by political enemies opposed to his stance on slavery. In 1991, Taylor became the first president to be exhumed for forensic testing. The results? No poison, just a tragic case of natural causes. Sometimes, history's mysteries have surprisingly simple answers. Christopher Columbus's posthumous journey rivals his voyages in life. After his death in 1506, his remains were buried in Valladolid, Spain, then moved to Seville. At his daughter-in-law's request, Columbus was shipped across the Atlantic to Hispaniola in 1542 and interred in a Santo Domingo cathedral. But when the French captured the island in 1795, the Spanish dug up remains thought to be Columbus's and moved them to Cuba. After the Spanish-American War in 1898, they were returned to Seville. However, in 1877, a box with human remains and Columbus's name was discovered in Santo Domingo, sparking a debate that continues today. So are Columbus's remains in the New World, in the Old World, or both? It seems even in death, Columbus is still trying to, discover places. Oliver Cromwell, the English revolutionary who overthrew the monarchy and signed the death warrant for King Charles I, was buried with honor in Westminster Abbey after his death in 1658. But when the monarchy was restored in 1661, King Charles II exhumed Cromwell's body on the 12th anniversary of his father's execution. In a grisly act of revenge, Cromwell's corpse was strung up, beheaded, and dumped into a pit. His head was mounted on a pike on the roof of Westminster Hall, where it remained for decades as a warning to would-be revolutionaries. Eventually, the head became a macabre collector's item, passing through various hands before being buried at Cromwell's alma mater, Sidney Sussex College, in 1960. Even in death, Cromwell's story is one of rebellion and retribution. Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of assassinating President John F. Kennedy in 1963, became the center of countless conspiracy theories. One of the most bizarre claims came from author Michael Eddowes, who argued that Oswald had been replaced by a Soviet spy during his time in the USSR. To prove his theory, Eddowes convinced Oswald's widow to exhume his body in 1981. Dental records confirmed the remains were indeed Oswald's, debunking the spy theory. Yet, questions linger. Some believe Oswald was a patsy, while others point to inconsistencies in the investigation. The exhumation may have settled one mystery, but the debate over Kennedy's assassination continues to captivate the world. Simon Bolivar, the revolutionary hero who liberated much of South America from Spanish rule, died in 1830 near Santa Marta, Colombia. Officially, his death was attributed to tuberculosis, but conspiracy theories suggested he was poisoned. In 2010, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, a fervent admirer of Bolivar, ordered his remains exhumed in a nationally televised spectacle. Forensic experts conducted tests to determine if Bolivar had been murdered by arsenic poisoning, but the results were inconclusive. Bolivar's legacy as El Libertador remains untarnished, but the mystery of his death endures, fueling speculation and debate. Daniel Boone, the legendary frontiersman who blazed trails through the American wilderness, died in 1820 and was buried in an unmarked grave near Marthasville, Missouri. But in 1845, Kentucky officials claimed Boone had wanted to be buried in his home state and exhumed what they believed were his remains, reburying them in Frankfort, Kentucky. However, some Missourians insist the wrong body was taken, and both states still claim to be Boone's final resting place. Boone's adventurous spirit seems to live on even in death, as his remains remain a subject of friendly and not-so-friendly rivalry. From outlaws to presidents, revolutionaries to explorers, these stories remind us that history is never truly buried. Whether for science, politics, or sheer curiosity, exhumations reveal how the past continues to shape our present. So the next time you walk through a cemetery, remember, some stories don't always end with a tombstone.